This all starts by taking the Clifton Strengths Assessment,
Yeah.
right? And it has to be augmented with some quality time in a workshop or with a
Yes.
coach to really embolden yourself and how you're uniquely you. Here you are, budding, marvelous person. Here's your strengths. Here's how you operate best. And you have permission to be you.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. And if the organization doesn't do that, do it for yourself. Own your journey.
Yeah.
Take the assessment, hire a coach. It's such a small investment in the context of your career, in the context of 1 year's salary, your first year's salary, to get some greater understanding of yourself.
Hi, and welcome to the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting.
This season, we're welcoming fellow coaches back to the show to explore how people can move beyond naming and claiming their talents to start to aim their talents. We're calling this season Strengths Applied. And our topic today is workplace onboarding. And before we dive into that topic, I want to take a special moment to welcome our guest coaches today. If you've been with us since season 1, you may recognize them already, or you will once you hear the voices. It's my honor to introduce you to Louann McCurdy. She has been on a few episodes with us where she gave us deeper insights into her strategic and ideation talents. She is the co-founder of Perspectives Consulting and is coming to us today from Vancouver, Canada. And for your reference, in case you can't remember, her top 5 are strategic, ideation, connectedness, learner, and maximizer. Welcome back, Louann.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Yay.
So thank you so much for joining back with us, Louann. I have the honor of introducing our other guest, Damian Zikakis. Damian is the founder and executive coach at DGZ Coaching. He's in Holland, Michigan, and joining us from there today. His top 5 are relator, learner, input, connectedness, and communication. And if you're a good friend of the show like Damian is, you will recognize him as he contributed to 4 of his 5 top themes in season 1. He helped us learn about learner, relator, input, and communication. Welcome back, Damian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
We're so glad to have you back. And once again, I'm surrounded by learners. Like listeners, you are in for a treat because these 3 learners on the screen with me here today are just going to give you all kinds of information. Welcome back, friends.
Thank you so much for joining us. Before we hear from Louann and Damian, Jen and I want to take a second and just sort of level set us on why we're talking about workplace onboarding and maybe even share some stats around it. So Jen, why are we talking about this?
Yeah, well, the 4 of us are Gallup-Certified Strengths Coaches, and we care deeply about improving the lives of workers. And part of our job is helping to create these workplaces where people can thrive. And I personally believe that the onboarding process sets that tone for the overall employee experience. Like it helps them understand the culture, it helps us connect to that culture and like provides us that confidence in our role. I think the best processes help build those early relationships. They can help us feel seen and valued in our role and not just like we're one of the cogs in the machine. And I think the best onboarding processes really lead to those feelings of belonging and psychological safety that we talk a lot about. So it's clearly pivotal to, like being a part of a workplace and understanding your place in it. And so I know that there's lots of really great stats on it. So maybe that's where we can go next, Chad. Did you have anything to add to the why?
I think the only other thing I would add to the why is that I think a lot of organizations get trapped into one way of onboarding. And I think we're going to touch on this as we go through our episode today, but that there's just one process. And it's my belief, and I think we're going to hear from our coaches today, that different strengths may need different things. And so I think that that's one of the other reasons why I think this could be a really valuable conversation. In relation to how it sets the tone, I do have some stats to bring. Gallup, of all people, surprise, surprise, has found that only 12% of U.S. employees believe that their company has a good onboarding process, and nearly 1 in 5, or almost 20%, of employees have had either a poor onboarding experience or none at all. Conversely, employees who report having an exceptional onboarding experience were 2.6 times more likely to be extremely satisfied with their organization. So you're going to keep people longer. So this goes to our work, generating the sort of work, or creating the sort of workplaces that you were talking about, Jen.
Yeah.
So there's a real importance to this on both sort of the emotional and the stat and performance side.
Oh, for sure. And I think it starts, with that, like those necessary HR functions when you first get started in a job. But I think many can resonate with that, like, I was thrown into the fire. It's a sink or swim kind of situation. And that may not be the best way to onboard someone. So, I want to kick us off with this. Like, Louann, I'm going to come to you first. What has been your experience either with workplace onboarding personally, as you've been onboarded onto places, or perhaps in your role where you've onboarded others?
Well, thanks, Jen, and thanks for those great stats, Chad. I was writing them down as you were mentioning them, so those are great. So, first and foremost, I have to acknowledge that I am part of a two-person business, and my colleague and best friend at work, Stephanie Kunar, and I work together. And anything that I'm talking about is something she and I have developed together. But one particular project that we're very proud to be associated with. Started with a single workshop with a senior team and grew to over 300 people working at a community college in Ontario, Canada. So they're on a roll to become strength-based campus, and we're
Awesome.
happy to support them. We've been working all the way from, college presidents, senior leadership, deans and directors, support staff, and even some faculty. And we also maintain 30 team grids for them, so team strengths grids. So, in terms of a data set, that's a lot. And we see a lot of coming, to and from with new employees. So that's a bit of the backstory. But in terms of the onboarding, we've experimented with a couple of different ways. And, situations are always different. So what we've done so far is when people start at the college, usually within the first week or 2 weeks, they take the strengths assessment. And that is a great start, but as we know, that's not enough, right? So that has been followed up with one-on-one coaching from Stephanie and I as a deep dive into their strengths. When there are groups of people that start together, we've done like a small onboarding workshop. This just gets people involved into Cambrian College's strength-based journey so far. Like, where are we going with this strengths thing? Introduce them to the strengths, vocabulary, language, the whole movement. Give them opportunities to share their strengths with others, dive deeper, and also introduce the Gallup app, the Gallup Access app
Okay.
that has a lot of
Nice.
information for them. So that's just like the first little bit on the onboarding side. Later, those employees will take a longer 3-hour introduction to strengths workshop with us, or next level workshops on strength-based communication, collaboration, or strength-based engagement for leaders, or coach approach for leaders program, just depending, where
Sure.
they are. So
Wow.
that's a bit. There we go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really amazing that you're like tapping into Clifton Strengths and bringing that to the onboarding experience. That's something I think is really pivotal in us understanding ourselves and then understanding how to work better with others. So yeah, that's awesome, Louann. Damian, I'd love to hear your experience, whether that's like with workplace onboarding for yourself or perhaps like onboarding others.
Being high in communication, I had a visceral reaction when Louann said, "Thanks, Chad, for those great statistics." I thought, "Thanks, Chad, for those horrifying statistics." It was great that you shared them with us, but
Yeah.
oh
Yes.
my gosh, 12%. So
12.
I would
Yeah.
not be in that 12%. I would be in the 1 in 5 would report having
Nice.
poor or none. Um,
Yeah.
And I would
Yeah.
say most of the onboarding was exposed to in different employment, and I probably worked for, gosh, 10 different organizations in the first 25 years, 30 years of my career. Um, uh, the onboarding was basically, here's where your office is. These are the forms you need to fill out. We're going to introduce you around your department. Now
Yeah.
get to work.
Right.
And so my experience since then, I've not had the opportunity like Louann has to actually be facilitating it. But what I have done is, as I've worked with career search or career coaching clients, oftentimes career search, job search coaching clients, and I have them complete the assessment and then go through their strengths and then teach them to talk about their uh, the experience on their resume through the lens of their strengths. I encourage them. I always provide them with a personal insights report from Cascade
Yeah.
that gives lots of good strengths language, and then I encourage them that, and I also give them a copy of their Bring Needs, the
Yeah.
longer version of that,
Yep.
again
Mhm.
from Cascade, and I say you should, hang this on your wall. Like everybody needs to know this about you, and you need to know this about other people, whether they've taken the assessment or not. And so, if you don't get a good onboarding experience, create your own, like own your own journey. And here are
Yeah.
some tips to do that. Be sure to tell people how they get the best of you, but then ask them, how do I get the best of you? And even ask your manager, how do I get the best of you? And so I don't know how many of those, hundreds of clients I've had have actually done that. Um, but they've all thought it was a good idea when I explained it to them and provided them the
Yeah.
tools to do that.
Oh, that's awesome. Damian, I love that because of course that speaks to like all the things we all talk about all the time. It's that bring in needs, like we need to like be able to talk about these things, but even doing it before they start a job, when they're in the job search, getting them thinking that way. So I think it says a lot to if they go in on an interview and they're getting kind of those canned questions and they're not feeling it right away, like they're going to be able to get this information out. I would think that that tells them a lot about whether or not they would want to be part of that organization. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Chad, I'd love to hear your experience too, if you have a minute.
Yeah, I do. And I'm so grateful that Damien's brought up the way of thinking about your strengths, and I think it also ties into Louann's talk of the team grids and understanding your own strengths as you start into your own employment, because that's an idea I really want to come back to a little later in the conversation. In terms of my own onboarding experiences, I think I have had a bit of a split. I've had an experience a lot like what Damien just mentioned, which is like, here's your desk, your computer's coming in 2 days, look at this manual, meet some people, and then that's it. I've also had a really great experience where my direct team leader really kind of got to know me. This is before CliftonStrengths was even on my radar. This was actually one of my first jobs, and I got somewhat spoiled because they had a very thoughtful process. It probably wasn't as strengths informed as we're talking about now, um, but it was very thoughtful and really exposed me to a lot of stuff. One of the things I really learned in that experience was that they had a lot of printed material for me to start absorbing right off the bat. And that's really how I learned best. It's no secret on this show. Learner is my number one. Jen has already put it out there. Our two wonderful guests of Learner. I know my learner learns best when I have printed material, when I can go and highlight or make notes on things. And the reason I bring that up is that my very next employer provided a fair amount of information, but it was all in meetings where I had to go and talk to people and try to scribble down notes as fast as I possibly could. And I found, later on in my work, I did not have as much of a clear understanding of some of our. I was working in admissions, so I needed to know about a lot of different parts of the campus, and there were parts of that work that did not feel complete to me because the onboarding process was done in a way that didn't necessarily feed my strengths. And again, I didn't
Yeah.
know that at the time because I hadn't taken Clifton Strengths yet. But reflecting back on it, that big difference between how information was presented to me was very different, and it showed in how well I was able to kind of start off. I eventually got to a place of competency, but how quickly I got there was very different. Um, so
Wow.
I
Yeah.
think that that's just my biggest piece of learning around onboarding and experiencing it myself.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
So
And I'm kind of like, oh, with you guys, I've been mostly in that like sink or swim situation where I'm just thrown into the fire, like you said, like here's your desk, here's your computer, like do the things. But that's most of my experiences. And thankfully I have some talents that help with that. We'll get to those in a second. But
yeah,
I think of my two best experiences were one, my internship at GM Powertrain in Flint, which that location is now closed, as these auto manufacturers do. But it was really fun. I went for facilities management in an internship, and we started with a full day of just learning the context of the business. So I got to learn all about like how they started, what they do, what our specific portion of the business does, and to the point where like I was with other groups of people who are also interns all across the board, any kind of position within GM. And we all together tore down a transmission and put one back together. Had nothing to do with what I was going to do for my job, did not have the skill set to do that, but I thought it was really cool because they really did make us hands-on to what that specific part of the organization did. So I thought that was really cool, a really great experience. And then the other one I had that was really amazing was when I was the first person to ever have that role in this company. So it was a very co-created sort of expectations around the role. Like we were like, well, we know we kind of have this need, but we don't really know what that looks like. And so being able to co-create that with the people that I was going to work with closely was really amazing. It made for great communication, had to be communicating back and forth. And we found that that really was our most important tool in like me being successful at my job and us working to best together. So while it might not have been the like really the greatest like way to onboard someone, I do think it was really unique and actually extremely helpful because I got to learn a lot about the business just from we don't know what we're going to do with you yet. Here, let's figure it out together.
Brilliant.
it's so interesting that we've all had sink or swim moments. It's something I think may come back up again as we go through this. I am curious, and just sort of moving this on, we've already started to touch on talents a little bit. And Louann, I love that you're talking about you've been able to help organizations incorporate Clifton Strengths into their onboarding process in a variety of different ways. As you and Damian, I'm going to come to you with this question first, just to make it fair. My Harmony wants to do that. Um, I I'm curious, as you think about the talents that may have helped you as you have been onboarded. You mentioned you've been in a couple, I think it was 10 different roles. Um, have there been talents that have been more helpful in terms of your onboarding, or maybe a couple that got in your way? Talk about how your talents have intersected with some of your onboarding experiences.
Mm. Well, I would say probably 4 of my 5 really have been helpful. Uh, Relator, learner, input, and connectedness. Communication never hurts, but those first 4. Um, and um, and so similar to you, Chad, the learner, is right up near the top for me, number 2. And so I probably asked an annoying amount of questions, in those early days of a job, wanting to know things that I can specifically remember being told, you don't really need to know this. And I would say, well, that's okay. I really want to know this. Um,
Hmm.
and um, and part of that was driven by learner, but also part by connectedness, because in the first 20 years of my career, I was doing accounting and finance, a CPA, ultimately a CFO. And so finance undergirds everything in an organization. Like everything is dollar denominated at the end of the day. And so I'd say, well, how long does it take to process this? And they say, well, you don't really need to know that. No, but I'm curious because I'm thinking this is connected to that. I've already heard about that thing. If we cut one of those steps out, we could reduce the cost by a quarter. I'm doing the math in my head as I'm getting my tour
Yeah.
of the facility. And so that's learner, that's connectedness. My relator, I could quickly assess the people that I felt like I would ultimately connect with and those that I might not, um, and then circle back and form relationships in places that were not, it would not be typical for the controller or the CFO to have a relationship. Like
Sure.
sometimes, it's almost sort of cliche, but like the head of maintenance, like they're a wealth of information, and I would never have to deal with them professionally. But I'd be like, so Mark, how's your day going? What's the biggest maintenance problem today? Like there's a clue in there of what's going on in the organization if maintenance is dealing with a spill out on the plant floor or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then input, of course, I'm like a squirrel gathering nuts. Every little tidbit I hear, I'm like, file that away. That might be useful in the future. Like, oh, be sure to know to check in with Mary once in a while because she's the keeper of all the gossip, right? Or whatever.
Yeah, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So really, and that's also advice I've given to clients along the way is, understand what your strengths are so that you can lean into them. Like we all can do all 34, right? But what are the things that you do without even having to think about it? And
Right.
lean into those for the benefit of your ongoing job/career.
Yeah. Which brings me over to Louann. Louann, you've got some like I know you and Damian both have connectedness, so I'm sure some of his comments are resonating a little bit. But I'm wondering if you either have used connectedness in a different way or if there are other themes that you have tapped into when you've been onboarding onto an organization. Um, and or if there's been a major lesson about one of your themes as you've helped with some of this onboarding you've done. um, I'm just wondering where your talents come into this conversation as we think about trying to help our listeners think about how their themes are either playing into their own onboarding or helping others onboard.
Yeah, really great question. And I really appreciated Damian's comments on there. I was kind of ticking the boxes going, yep, yep. Yeah. Learner input, connectedness, that desire to understand, what's my role at this company to make this company, fulfill its mission? Who do I get to collaborate with? And how will we collaborate? And what are the norms around collaboration here, so that we can do the great things? A lot of people have been through many interviews before they onboard. They've could have interviewed with a company, in the tech world. It's like not unusual to interview 5, 6, 7 times with the one company before you start. So it's not like you're starting from scratch, but the context of the conversation is a little bit different now. It's like, okay, we've hired you. This is your first day, and you want to know, like, you want to know the culture. You've finished selling yourself, but now you want to be collaborating with people to make great things happen. And I think that's um, how knowing your own strengths, but also having permission to find out strengths of others is so powerful.
Yeah.
Jen, you are
The
I
odd
know
man
your
out.
strength. Well, I was going to say, I'm looking at my Zoom screen right now. For those of you that are watching this on YouTube, you'll know what I'm talking about. But the three of us are sort of like the old Sesame Street, like which one of these doesn't belong in a very friendly, fun way. But Jen, you have very executing based themes, and we're talking a lot
Yes.
about relationship building and strategic thinking. I'm curious which
Yep.
of your themes have been super helpful because I'm sure some of our listeners out there are some fellow activators or
Yep.
achievers or people with belief as a theme. Um,
Yep.
how do yours come into this conversation?
It's okay to call me the which one doesn't belong, Chad. It's how I feel when I'm in a room full of learners and all these strategic thinkers. And when I think about my strategic thinking talents, and my first one is analytical at 14, and then the rest are really lower than that. So it's okay. I'm okay being the doer in the group of the thinkers and the relationship builders. I would say personally for me, I think that those constant places where I've been thrown into the fire in the sink or swim kind of moments, my responsibility, my achiever, and my activator are definitely the ones that have helped me push through some of those really terrible onboarding experiences. I'm okay to just jump in, take the initiative, get things going, finish them, get them done. And I think the one I lean on maybe the most out of all of, like even if I'm dipping into my top 10, would maybe be my adaptability at 7. Like it has been the one that has helped, especially if I can form some of those like deeper relationships with people right off the bat. I do have Relator too. But being that if I can start to form some of those relationships quick, if you're important to me, I will be extremely flexible for you. So it's helped me like even though I have some of these like very rigid with belief and my deliberative tends to be a little more on the rigid side too. I have consistency that follows my activator. So being that I have some of these like more rigid kind of talents, I think my adaptability one is the one that has helped like when those relationships are already built, it's helped me be flexible for others. So I can like keep those relationships moving forward, build trust with others by really working hand in hand. Unlike you, I do not learn from reading. Like that would not be, if they gave me a pile of things to like, hey, it's your first day and like, here's your stack of stuff to read all of this. And then tomorrow you get to do, I'd be like, this is not the place for me. I cannot learn that way. So I think that's a really great thing for us to just know about yourself, like how you learn, how things like, would you rather be thrown to the fire or do you need like a week of like ramp up time where you're going to be reading and learning, or maybe even just watching others do before you do on your own. I think that's really important to know that about yourself. Chad, so curious about yours after we've heard our other learner guests on this.
Well,
on
it's
this
funny
one too.
because Damian, I loved what you said because you hit on three of the themes I was going to touch on, which are learner, connectedness, and input. Um, I'm going to just say ditto on most of that because it is about sort of sucking in the new relationship. I even connectedness is number 7 for me, so it's not necessarily in my sort of obvious top 5. But you know exactly what you're saying about piecing information together. Input, obviously, anything I can keep and store and know for the future is great. Um, I think the only other one that I added, and it's a bit more in the strategic thinking domain, is analytical. So I love gathering the data. I love having more information than might what be obvious on the front. It kind of goes with Damian's comment about input. I
Yeah.
don't necessarily need like it doesn't look obvious that I would want to know that or that I want access to that spreadsheet, but boy, if I do, you'll get so much more out of me. And so I think one of the, taking that and sort of expanding it to all of your responses, one of the things that was coming across for me was listen to how different each of our onboarding experiences would need to be, right? Damian and I and maybe Louann, we want a lot of that information right up front. The learner, the gathering. Damian, I love that you touched on the relationships and that relator piece coming in and knowing who to go back to or who to keep in touch with. And Louann, I think you touched on a little bit of that with your connectedness, being that relationship building thing. But then Jen's like, put me in action. I want to learn by doing it. I want to get right into the mix. I don't want to sit with a stack of papers. I think this is where maybe onboarding kind of goes awry.
Mhm.
Is that a company has a singular approach that doesn't recognize the talents of each person. I mean, just among the 4 of us, we all need different
Right.
things. A one size fits all is likely to bomb. Like it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a takeaway I was having or thought I was having as you were all talking.
Well, and specifically thinking about these different types of employees and these different types of learning styles that we just hit on, like, I don't know that I thought this was going to go there, like that we all learn differently. And so therefore our onboarding experience maybe needs to be different because of that. I was even thinking about like, well, now we have in-person employees, we have hybrid, we have remote employees, and how there's that tendency for those employees who maybe are remote or hybrid tend to like feel forgotten. And so I want to come to you two again to ask you about like, do you think that there are ways that we could onboard those specific groups maybe differently if you've had any experience with that? Or maybe if not, and you want to like think to more of that advice for that employee who is remote or hybrid and is feeling like they've been forgotten, like, okay, we gave you your stuff and now you're at home and working on your computer all by yourself. Like what can we do to support those newly onboarded employees? Damian, I want to come to you for the first this time.
So I don't have any experience with it, but if I was asked for advice about it, if an individual said, I'm going to be working remote, what advice would you have since I can't walk around and meet all these people?
Yeah.
I would say then again, own your own experience. Like, yeah, HR is organizing this thing, but very quickly get with your manager, your coworkers, and have a list of questions. Who else should I be talking to? And and almost like an not reverse interviewing. Now I'm going to interview you. What was the most important thing that you learned in your first month, and when did you learn it? So that I can short circuit that and learn it in my first week, kind of a thing. Or who have you been surprised by that is a key person to know that isn't necessarily in our department? Again, relator connectedness, learner coming out there. Um,
Yeah.
and and that may be a little bit obvious to somebody that's got those talents, but it definitely wouldn't be for somebody that doesn't. But yet,
Mm.
if Jen, if you and I had been working together, you might tweak how you approach that, but the same concept would be the same, which is own your own journey and make
Yeah.
sure you have a chance to meet people as if you were walking around. And it's the other thing that comes to mind from career coaching is networking, like network within the organization. And one of my common networking advice is when you reach out to somebody, ask for 15 minutes because most people don't manage their calendar in 15-minute increments. They manage it in 30. So if I say, hey, Louann, can you spare 15 minutes sometime in the next 2 weeks? She'd be hard pressed to say, no, I don't have 15 minutes. So
Right.
now I get on and I don't care if it's 9 business days from now. I've got 15 minutes and that's all I need. It's like stopping by the office to ask a couple of questions. Hey, I'm new
Mhm.
here, blah, blah, blah. What advice do you have for me? So anyway, that's my
Oh,
off the
Damian,
top of my head.
I love that, like like ruling your or yeah, owning your own experience because you're absolutely right. That is not where I would go first with all of my executing talents. I wouldn't be like, oh, well, I'm going to reach out to all these people I don't know. Nope, I'll just be do 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 do. Thank you so much for that, Luann. How about for you? Like, what either like advice could you give to that person who's feeling like they're like maybe not going to have the best onboarding experience because they're out on their own, or maybe how have you dealt with some of those remote or hybrid roles and onboarding in through your experience?
So the fact is onboarding, I mean, sort of remote hybrid is almost the norm these days.
Yeah,
So it's, and many of the key factors of getting to know people are the same, whether it's in person or remote. It's
yep,
just maybe you have to be a little more intentional when
yes,
remote. And to be more intentional, I think you have to really have a little more self-awareness and self-assurance that it's okay. So you need permission,
yeah,
formally or informally, to reach out. And you have to have that kind of internal confidence of like, what am I interested in finding out? So am I more like a general learner, or am I more like, I want to know how to do, like Jenny, right? Because that is
right.
equally important and arguably more important. Because I'm like, Want to be more like Jen. Okay. So, how do you build that confidence? And is that's by understanding your strengths. So
Yeah.
this strengths assessment needs to be scheduled into the onboarding experience. It has to happen. And that takes, the willingness of the manager, whoever, to make that decision because that's like, I think that's the nugget, the first seed that says, yeah, okay, here you are, budding, marvelous person. Here's your strengths. Here's how you operate best. And you have permission to be you, uniquely you, as Jen would say. Um,
Yes.
and, go forth. Here's some people to meet. And let's meet again because I want to find out what you learned.
Yeah. Oh, and I love how you started that, Louann, about being intentional about making those connections. I think that's the biggest key to that is if it doesn't come naturally to you, it does have to be one of those very intentional things that you do. Damian, I love the idea of like networking where you work. I don't think enough people do that. So love that answer too. Chad, do you have anything to add? They gave some fantastic answers.
I'm not sure. I mean, I've got a couple comments. I was coming at it from a slightly different angle.
Oh, yeah, go for
I
it.
think the one point that I would really want to re-emphasize, I loved how Louann, your comment kind of bled into what Damian contributed there, which is the intentionality of putting the Clifton Strengths Assessment, you know, I mean, ideally, I'd love to see that go out like right after the offer, as soon as they
Right.
sign the offer letter, like, hey, we love, we're so glad that you're on board. We want to know your most unique self. And then we honor that. And I think that's another piece that really sticks
Yeah.
out is it around that permission piece. You're giving permission for people to be their genuine selves, and that you're signaling that we respect that not every one of our employees is the exact same. So I think that goes to countering all the horrible stats that I read off at the beginning, and reversing that into the more positive onboarding experience. From that, you then get what Damian was talking about, which is owning their own journey. If you've started to signal that that person has certain strengths, then you know how to best formulate that path for them.
Yeah.
I think one tag on idea I have to that is if you can match them with sort of a strengths ally. If you have somebody already on your team that has similar strengths, that has done their own onboarding and has kind of learned in the same way, so you wouldn't necessarily want to take, you could, but you wouldn't necessarily take somebody with, say, Jen's talents and make me their strengths ally, because I want to be very thoughtful in what I'm learning and everything. And Jen is like, let's disassemble a transmission and actually get into the action of things, right? So there's a different dynamic there. But if you could match Jen with somebody that is very much action oriented or wants to get right into the process of things, you setting up that strengths ally and partner that can walk them through and have them enjoy a better onboarding experience, I think would be a really smart idea in terms of whether it's remote or hybrid or in office. I think just having a strengths ally that looks at the onboarding process in a similar way would be a really smart idea. Um,
Yeah, love that, Chad.
yeah. So
I
I think that'd be my main contribution to that of that. And I think the other thing that I think Damian's already touched on, which is sort of that here's how you get the best of me. Here's how you get the
Yeah.
worst of me. I'm at my best. This is what I bring. This is what I need. All that information, if you can help co-create that statement or help the person as part of their onboarding process, put a big poster up on their up on their brand new door and say, before you enter,
This is
this
me.
is how you're going to get me.
This
I
is what
think
you're
that
going
was
to
a
get
really,
when you come in the door.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
for remote people, I'm not sure exactly how you do that, but I'm sure. I mean, all of us are trained on the eGrow platform. I know a lot of teams are starting to use the Microsoft integration, which has a lot of information as people go to type emails and Microsoft Team experiences. But there are other ways to do it, and
great.
you just have to be thoughtful about it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. You guys took all of my answers. every single one of them. Like you got them all. So I love that we touched on all of them. And the one thing that Damian, I keep coming back to your like networking where you work. And it spiked something in me that there was a moment in that job that I was telling you guys all about, that I got to like co-create what my role was. I also made it a point to go and work and actually do the job of like 5 or 6 other people. Like I sat with them and did their job with them. So I was I was actually an installer for a while. I was a project manager for a while. Like I actually worked with all these different roles within what our company did. And then it helped me. So rather than learning the way like you guys had talked about, like, oh, well, what do you do here? And how does, like, asking all those questions, and they're like, you don't need to know that to do your job. No, probably not. But I personally need to know that. And I was doing the same thing, but from a doing standpoint. Like, in order for
Yep.
me to do my job well, I need to see what that looks like, what the stuff I'm doing, how it interacts with what you're doing. So love that. It totally does not fit with this whole topic of like feeling unseen and unheard, but it did like spike that thing in my brain that I'm like, hold on, I've done that before, but not in a asking questions, in an actual doing space. So I just think that was like a little for those doers, for my doer friends out there, if you're looking to, get around and you're not really wanting to like talk to everybody, maybe go do their job with them for a while, see what it's like.
Okay, so
Brilliant.
yeah. Sorry, Louann, did you have something else you want to add?
Really, I mean, what
Oh,
Jen said is brilliant, but like, well, I will like, can I talk about the team grid a little bit? Is that okay to bring that
Yeah,
up?
yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
An amazing tool for managers to
Yeah.
have. And when a new member of the team joins, update the team grid, get someone
Well,
updated.
tell us what that team grid is, Louann, because there may be people on who don't really know what that means.
Yeah, sorry.
No
It's a
worries.
it's a grid of the team members and their strengths. And the strengths, along the rows are the team members and their top 5 strengths, and then the strengths are organized in the domains. And it's
Okay.
typically color coded so you can see at a glance the team itself, which domain they tend to be dominant in, and then you can do an analysis like who's super strong in a particular domain, who's unique, who's got the only strength in the whole team for that domain,
Yeah.
if there are any gaps, and maybe where there might be some really cool partnerships.
Awesome.
Nice,
And to
nice.
Jen's point, as a doer, and to Chad's point, who would be who would be your buddy, like in terms of strengths, right? It could be someone that where they share the same domain. Could easily be that, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Jen, let me show you how to do this and how to do that and how to do that, because I know together we'll build a great relationship based on
Mm,
that. Um,
right. But
that's
on the flip side of that,
that's
like
exactly.
don't
There's a flip side.
don't put me with somebody who's all like idea creation, whatever, because I'm gonna be like halfway through how I'm gonna do the thing that they just said and they change their, oh, let's do this. And I'm like, no, my adaptability, if I like you, we're okay. So put those learners and ideation and inputs like together in a group, let them like popcorn ideas and like come up with those neat things. I think like you're right, having that strengths buddy is such an easy place to find that if you know the strengths of your team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is a tip, is have your team strengths grid available, like
Yeah.
in your pocket. I mean, before you
Yeah.
go to the meeting, I mean, just live and breathe it, because it'll like spark ideas or spark conversations around strengths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Luann, it's great that you brought up that tool, because the next question I was going to ask both of you, and since you've already started, I'm gonna let you keep going here. But in addition to this, to the team grid and keeping that updated, if you were thinking about new managers who are trying to use their strengths to onboard new team members, maybe the leader's only been in their position for 6 months or 9 months, and they've got a new team member joining. Are there particular tips that you would suggest that they do, either around their own talents or around understanding their new team members' talents, that might make that onboarding process go just a little bit better, so that we can get out of the 12% and get a little bit more, and let's get it at least north of 20. Let's hope that we can do something along that line. But like, think about those managers. What would you have to add in addition to the team grid? What other points could new managers take?
So, yes. So know your own strengths and how they impact your management style. So find a coach, review your team, your strength reports, know yourself. Self-awareness is key. Then know your team member strengths and have frequent meetings with each of them about their strengths, their work. Just make that a normal course of the week. It could be a weekly meeting, it could be 3 times a week meeting, but if you want to build a strength-based culture, you need to be familiar with your colleagues' strengths, and you need to be confident in your own and be willing to kind of claim and name them, at any given moment. So I think my advice is probably more along that line. And the other thing I'll just add in right now is the Best of Us worksheet. As I think Chad, you already mentioned, it is a
Yeah.
tool. It's not just an experience, isn't a tool. We've worked with companies that have really kept a repository of those sheets. And when a new team member comes in, they schedule coffee chats with each of the other team members using the Best of Us worksheet as a way of getting beyond the "hi, nice to know you, to have a dog" kind of conversation to like, here's how we can work together better
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Kind of goes to Damian's point about networking within your organization, right? You kind of have a preloaded script or preloaded talking
Right.
points to do some of that networking. That's great. Um, Damian, new managers trying to onboard people. What are your tips and tricks, and what should they be paying attention to?
Yeah. So kind of this is kind of a ditto moment, but what I would say is uh, I love the personal insights report. It's kind of a cheat sheet. It's only, a line or two or a word or two. Um, but if you could generate that both on the manager and hand it to the new employee, and then generate it for the new employee. And then, of course, the other one is um, bring need. Again, here's mine, and here's yours that I've kept a copy of, so that I can be reminded when we meet. What do you need, and what will you bring automatically? I think those tools are really shorthand. It'd be great if every manager kept a copy of their staff members' reports and reviewed them on an annual basis. But I'm
Mhm.
realistic, that's probably never going to happen. But they could review those 2 sheets of paper that I just mentioned on a
Yeah.
monthly basis. And that would change engagement in that group, that organization
Oh,
dramatically.
yeah.
Uh,
Oh, yeah. 90% of the conversations would be clearer, better expectations for sure.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm reflecting on sort of the totality of our conversation and realizing that, so much of a lot of our onboarding experiences are usually wrapped up in process and learning information. And those of us learners, we love a lot of that information, but so much of it is usually about process and documentation and SOPs. And yet what we're talking about here in terms of new managers and really onboarding people, it's focusing on the person. It's focusing not so much on the handbook, but the human being in front of you. I just
Yeah.
I think that's the big shift that we all need to start making. Um,
Yeah.
just as sort of a general observation as sort of a thread that's run through this whole conversation. Jen, do you have thoughts on
Can I say
helping our new
ditto?
managers?
Like they absolutely same thoughts about like getting to know yourself, getting to know your team. Um, doing the opposite, like using your strengths to like meet your boss. If you're the new manager and you're like, okay, you have all these specifics that you have to get, like using that to go upwards too, so that you can kind of get the best out of your manager, and then your manager can get the best out of you. I think that the new managers have this opportunity. If the onboarding experience in their company sucks, like they have like an opportunity within their own team to make that not be the case for the people who join their team. So and then when that happens, and the good things start to come out of like having these relational conversations about getting to know the person and then how they work best, when your boss sees that you are doing that with your team and your team is thriving, they're going to be like, hold on, like they're going to take notice. And I think that's a grassroots way that like we could change the onboarding experience for the whole company. If you get someone who's doing things differently, who's not just looking at those processes, the HR like requirements, checking the boxes. Yes, we talked about all of these things. Oh, I sparked something with Damian.
I'm remembering a book, and it was called First Break All the Rules.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Successful managers went above and beyond what was in this, standard operating procedures, right? And here we
Yes.
are, 30 years
Yes.
later, talking about it.
Right.
That it still needs to
Exactly.
be done.
And
They still need to
and
break the rules.
and not everyone has read that. Not everyone has taken that and gone like, oh yeah, it's okay. I have the permission as this person, like as my, as being the manager of this team, as being the like person on this team, like I do have the permission to maybe step outside the like what is supposed to like our normal things and maybe try something new, and you never know what could come from it. Chad, the only other thing, it kind of goes exactly to the bring in needs, the best of us. We talked about creating user manuals on one of our episodes about having a user manual for like how to work best with me, and then sharing that with others, like, oh, then let me learn how I can work best with you. So like having those user manuals of things. So those were my only two little points.
Yeah. Damian, you have another wonderful thought?
Yeah, I just a story to share. I
Oh,
worked with a manager one time who actually had her team members create a user manual on themselves when they
Wow.
joined the team. And it had a bunch of that personal stuff, like I have a dog,
yeah.
I went to this college, reason I chose that is blah, blah, blah. And so the person created their own, shared it with the manager, and then maybe there was some tweaking, and then it got shared with everybody else in the department. So everybody knew what makes Jen tick.
Ah,
Um, and it sort of jump started those relationships. Like I grew up with a colleague, and you have one, those sorts of things that.
yeah.
Uh,
No,
anyway, so I
Well,
love
and
that idea of
again,
user manuals. Yeah,
grassroots, right? Like we like that's one person who brought their own user manual to the team, and it got shared with the whole department. And then I'm sure that meant that the whole department was like, well, I want to make one. Like, you need to know about me. Yeah. So cool.
this is the only other thought I was going to throw out, and I think we've sort of touched on it, so I'm not going to tap on it too much. But there's actually a Gallup article that really talks about leadership styles. We often hear about the autocratic style and the diplomatic style and the I forget there's like 7 or 8 of them depending upon which book you pick up. But Gallup then came out and said, well, it's really not about those styles. It's really about how your strengths leadership style. So if you're a little bit more executing, then maybe your process is a little bit more, or your leadership style is a bit more process focused or people focused for the relationship building. And I got looking at that article for a different reason recently, but as we prepped for this, I was like, well, wait a minute, if you kind of change the lens a little bit, if you think about your people coming in, and we've already talked about this, but think about what their process needs to be based on what their talents need to be. So if you have somebody that is super executing, like Jen was talking about, maybe it's helping them understand the workplace processes and SOPs, and helping them do it. If they're really into that doing mode, helping them viscerally experience that. If they're people focused, you're going to hear a little bit more maybe in what Damian has been talking about in terms of building those relationships and making sure that the networking starts first before all the handbook working stuff that usually gets incorporated into onboarding. Um, the thought, the strategic thinking, those of us give them time to consider. I know a lot of onboarding processes I've been part of, jam everything into the first 4 days you're there, right? I can only imagine. I don't have intellection super high, but if you've got intellection or another theme that really needs some time and space to
Yeah.
process, jamming 12 meetings in one day and then have you read through a whole manual in the next, that's not going to work. You need to space that in. And then the other one was influencing, and that's really more about impact. And so maybe the onboarding needs to reinforce a little bit, maybe the larger vision or the purpose behind all of our work, or the core goals and what the impact is supposed to be, and having that be kind of drive the onboarding process. So I think that'd be the only other way that I only bring that up as just sort of maybe a different lens on some of the conversation we've already had, just as new managers think about those user manuals and then also making the partnerships and what the process of actual onboarding looks like. So um, I'm just
Right.
gonna. We've spent almost a full, wonderful hour together with our wonderful guests here. Louann and Damian, are there any big key points that you would love to hit on that maybe our questions didn't touch on that you really wanted to get out into the world through this podcast? Or any big key takeaways from this that like brand new revelation that you want to make sure we capture here at the end?
So I'm waiting for Damien because he has communication. I defer to his communication. But I have strategic. And so part of me is like, wait, this all starts by taking the CliftonStrengths Assessment,
Yeah.
right? And it has to be augmented with some quality time in a workshop or with a
Yes.
coach to really embolden yourself to know like that you're uniquely you and how you're uniquely you. So, it's for a manager, I just thinking about the return on investment of that for their team is got to be, pretty amazing.
Excellent.
I would agree with that.
Cool.
Yeah, I spent 9 years as an executive recruiter, and the key thing that we always that in my firm that we talked to our clients about was hiring the right fit. And I would talk to individuals about that, and none of that was informed by Clifton Strengths, um, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, Clifton Strengths, how we're wired, our specific patterns of thinking, feeling, behaving, um, do play a key role in there. And so, um, this is one of those yes, I absolutely agree with you. And if the organization doesn't do that, do it for yourself. Own your journey.
Yeah.
Take the assessment, hire a coach. It's such a small investment in the context of your career,
Yes.
in the context of 1 year's salary, your first year's salary, to get some greater understanding of yourself. And if you, I've been working with a group now since January, my first Eat to Grow client, actually. We're doing its follow on to a workshop I did. And one of the things that came up in a session yesterday on communication was the fact that when we have greater self-awareness and greater awareness of the others, then there's this element of compassion or grace that emerges. Like, I don't need to make excuses for why I didn't do something as well as somebody else did. I can think about it from the context of, well, they're naturally good at this. For me, it requires more effort. And conversely, if I feel like this other person let me down, well, what are their strengths? How do those inform my understanding of that person? So it's such a powerful tool that we all love and want to propagate through the world. So yes to you. And if they don't do it for you, do it for yourself.
Yes.
Very much agree
And
with you, David.
and I think that's maybe even more important than someone who is like hiring you and they're like, oh, like take this assessment. And I can't tell you how often I've heard, these big companies have done it and they had coaches. But what I heard from the employees was, yeah, they made me take this assessment. I never had a one-on-one conversation with it. What it became was like weaponized to now my manager wants me to do specifically like these 3 things because my strengths say I'm good at it. But they never talked to me about it. They never talked to me about what this looks like for me or how to use this better, how to be more intentional. And that's where I want to say the yes, and just like you said, Damian, if your employer brings this to you and you have the opportunity to take this assessment and learn about yourself, if they don't give you the opportunity to go deeper, you do it for yourself, because it's amazing the things we can learn about ourselves. And then that also opens our eyes. You can see your own talents in other people who have the same talents as you. You start to spot them and be like, oh, I know why you did that. Like, okay, now I know how you and I can work better together because I can understand where you're coming from with that.
Well, I want to thank both our guests, Damian and Louann, for their wonderful insights today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm hoping that all of our listeners out there have gotten something out of this. I know I have. So, as our listeners consider this episode and what they take away, I'm going to keep encouraging you to keep playing to your strengths.
Be uniquely you.
If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts.